This right here is the Basmu, a somewhat underrated rifle in Warframe that is now so strong in 2026, it can literally delete an entire room worth of enemies with just one hit. I'm talking millions of damage in red crits, a special new augment, and yes, even multiplicative condition overload. So, in this Warframe guide, I'm gonna show you everything you need to know about the Basmu in 2026, and I even have multiple different strong builds prepared. As always, big shoutouts to all our lovely channel members, and now, let's jump right into it. But first of all, let's talk about how you can actually get your greedy little fingers on the Basmu, cause here I think I have to make a little bit of an apology. See, the Basmu is unfortunately not always available in the game. It specifically is an event weapon. What I mean is, it was first introduced with the event Operation Scarlet Spear, and then it basically returned for all major events like Orphic's Venom. It returns usually every year for the Knights of Naboris Halloween event in October, and the last time we had access to it, which is also why I want to apologize, was the Blood of Parita event that ended like 2 or 3 days ago. Yeah, would have been kinda cool had I made this video a bit earlier, but unfortunately I didn't have the time to put it out sooner. Nonetheless though, no need to worry, because the Basmu blueprint is tradable between players, and because the event just ended, if we take a look at Warframe Market right here, the Basmu blueprint is incredibly cheap at the moment. So if you want to have it, then better buy the blueprint right now, otherwise you either have increasing prices or you gotta wait till Knights of Naboris in October. Next though, let's talk about how the Basmu actually works. And surprisingly, there is quite a lot to unpack here. First of all, at base, the Basmu is a fully automatic assault rifle. It shoots laser projectiles, and even though it looks like it's a hit-scan weapon, it actually works more like the Exceltra in the sense that it shoots actual projectiles that also have a bit of an AoE explosion on impact. These mini-explosions have a radius of 1.7 meters and deal heat damage, but for the sake of this video I don't really want to focus on them all too much, because I find the real strength of the Basmu actually lies in the direct hits. However, not only does the Basmu have this laser primary fire, it also has an alternative fire in which it shoots 2 continuous laser beams, and similar to many other beam weapons, these beams also link to nearby enemies. Just one very important thing to note here, they also kinda latch onto the enemy, which in contrast to normal beam weapons, makes it actually pretty darn difficult to hit any specific spot on the enemy body. Like headshotting with those beams is gonna be a bit tricky unfortunately. The third interesting feature about the Basmu, no, we're still not done, is that it doesn't have an ammo reserve. It only features a 21-round magazine. However, more interestingly, when you don't fully empty the clip, it will start recharging back up. So if you have a bit of trigger discipline, it's actually not all too bad. However, and this is a special trait of the Basmu, if you fully empty the magazine, then afterwards the rifle will release multiple energy pulses that stagger nearby enemies and siphon off some of their health to actually heal you. I don't think that's actually too big of a meta feature, but I still wanted to bring it up nonetheless. Now, let's also take a look at the weapon stats, and here we gotta differentiate between the main fire and the alternative beam mode, where the main fire is mostly focused on status with pure electricity damage, 39 of that, whereas the alt fire, this one is actually very darn interesting. It only features 12 electricity damage per beam, so 24 in total, not all that much, and it also has a pathetic crit chance of only 2%. However, we have a kind of Kuva Nukor situation here. We have a 4.8 times base crit damage multiplier. This is absolutely insane and one of the highest crit damage multipliers in the entire game. Don't worry, we're gonna take a look at how we can exploit that to our advantage when we get to the build section later. Just in general though, looking at all the features that we have here, I think for the Basmu there are 2 main playstyles. One where you focus mainly on the primary fire, trying to get direct hits, and then a second one where you focus mainly on getting flat crit chance buffs to increase the low crit chance of the alt fire, which then allows you to fire it into groups of enemies, benefit from the damage link, and get ridiculous status damage performance out of it. Both is viable, and if you like to, you can even sort of combine it into a hybrid playstyle where you focus on single enemies with the main fire, and if there's a group, you use the alt fire beam. And as always, if you could leave a quick like for the video, that'd be super nice because it always helps big time with the YouTube algorithm. Cheers so much for your support. But now, before we jump into the builds themselves, there are 3 very important mods that I want to discuss first because they will have a major impact on how we actually build this thing. First of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Dreadful Killshot. This is a Basmu-specific augment mod, so you can only put it on the Basmu, and you can get it pretty easily at the moment, because all you need to do is achieve rank 3 with the current Nightwave season. It's probably still going to be around for a while, so no stress with getting it. What the mod does is, for every 75% health that your Warframe has, you will gain plus 20% base damage and plus 20% status chance, capping at a maximum of 360%. In order to get this maximum, your Warframe needs to have at least 1,350 health, and we're also not talking about maximum health here, it's all about the current health, so if you take a big hit, then your buff will also be reduced. Unfortunately, not every Warframe can have that much health just with mods alone, which is why I would recommend that if you play the Basmu on a Warframe that doesn't have that much of a high health pool, Arcane Blessing is your best friend, giving every Warframe enough health to max this mod out. The next mod we want to talk about here is Galvanized Aptitude, and this one is going to be a short one. You probably already see where I'm going with this. Because the main fire of the Basmu is not hit skin, but actually a projectile, the damage bonus gained from Galvanized Aptitude is multiplicative on direct hits by the main fire. Now, I've talked about this a lot, and I even have a dedicated video on my side channel just talking about the whole condition overload mechanics, so I'm gonna keep it short here. What this means is, if you use the Basmu for the primary fire, you want to make sure to have base damage and Galvanized Aptitude both on the weapon, because it will give you ridiculous damage bonuses. Just very important here, and to be totally clear, this multiplicative damage only works on direct hits by the main fire. The main fire AoE doesn't benefit from it, and also the alt fire beam doesn't benefit either. And then the last mod I want to mention here would be Primary Acuity. This one I think is also very good on the Basmu because it gives you not only more crit chance, but also a massive buff in damage, which is not base damage, but actually weak point multiplier. With this mod, you're gonna get some filthy headshots in. Okay, now it is time to talk about the builds. And when it comes to Basmu builds, I first want to quickly take a look at this Warframe right here, my Harrow, because I feel the Basmu in specific really wants to be played in the hands of specific Warframes, Harrow being one of them. And there are 3 main reasons why. First of all, let's talk about the elephant in the room, of course his 4th ability Covenant, because of the massive crit chance bonus. And once the buff activates, we get 50% crit chance and plus 200 on headshots. As you also see here, headshots deal instant red crits, even though the weapon only has a measly 15% base crit chance. As you see also here, on a body shot it deals yellow, sometimes even white. On a headshot, bam, there we have the fat red crit. That is because of Harrow's Covenant. This is especially important also for the alt fire, because while it only has a 2% crit chance at base, in the hands of Harrow when Covenant is on, you amp that up by 50%, and if you had Arcane Avenger, then you would have a guaranteed yellow crit on every hit with just a 2% base crit chance. In addition to that, Harrow also has a second ability which increases fire rate and reload speed, as you can also see here. If we use this thing without the buff, then not only is the fire rate lower, but also the reload is painfully slow for such a small magazine. And thirdly, because the Basmu really likes to be played into headshots for those big red crits, Harrow has a third big feature, and that is his first ability, which ties enemies down, it stuns them in a way that their heads are nicely exposed, making it very easy in the heat of battle to actually, get those headshots in. These are 3 main reasons for why I think Harrow is the perfect Warframe for the Basmu. Let's now though go over the Basmu builds, and oh boy do I have a lot prepared here. The first one right here is kind of sort of like an overall build. You can swap out the faction damage mod and then you can basically use it against whatever. What we do here is we focus mainly on electricity and a lot of status damage over time, which is the reason why we want to have faction damage or want to have elementalist, because not only do we have a high base status chance, but with the dreadful Killshot augment we get 360% on top, and with primary crux we get another 300% on top of that, meaning we're gonna get so many electricity procs. Like, you can also see it right here, one magazine gives you instantly 100 electricity, and that is without stacking any other buffs up yet. Just one thing I really like for the Basmu: if you have the mod space, try to go for guided ordnance in the Excellus slot, because the main fire I feel is not all that precise, and especially if you want to hit those headshots, then this right here is a godsend. The rest of the build is pretty self-explanatory. We mod not for crit chance, but only for crit damage, because the crit chance is coming from the external buffs, you know, Arcane Avenger, Harrow, all that stuff. And then the rest is a pretty self-explanatory damage over time electricity build. The next one, and this is one of my favorites here, this is a very headshot focused build. You don't use the alt fire all too much here, you just focus on getting those headshots in with the main fire, and they are absolutely devastating. First of all, we go for primary acuity, like we explained previously, for more damage on the weak point kills. Then also here, dreadful Killshot for more base damage and more status chance, and we'll also go for Elementalist and faction damage here because you have so much status chance still that if you deal a DOT with electricity, it's just gonna slap super hard. I personally like to stay with just electricity for this one, but if you wanted to, you could replace Serration with any other elemental mod to gain any type of combined element that you desire. And finally, we go for primary Deadhead here, because it further increases your headshot multiplier. It also reduces the recoil, which I think, even though it's not all that high, it's still very much appreciated. And if we showcase this build in practice, let's first stun the enemies, then apply a lot of status effects with the Epitaph. And as you see right here, like they just get completely deleted. 2.5 million, 3.8 million on a headshot. Like these are some filthy numbers right here. This is a fully automatic weapon that absolutely one-hits everything on a headshot. And if an enemy is near, then the electricity zap is also like instantly deleting the nearby enemies too. And because not everybody likes this headshot-focused playstyle, I also have a variation of this where we don't use Acuity. Instead, we use a multi-shot mod. And here, you know, the Arcane, you can also use whichever one you like. I decided to try out Primary Bulwark because, you know, the Basmu wants to be played with a very health-tanky frame. So I was assuming probably to have a lot of armor as well, which is why this gives a lot of damage. But again, you can use Primary Crux if you want to have the status chance, you can use Deadhead, you can use Debilitate, whichever you like. This one is just really a flex slot here. But now, let's get to the, in my opinion, best and most fun build on the Basmu, and that will be Acuity Blast. This is an absolute blast to play, pun not necessarily intended, it's just the facts. Because our goal with this build is, remember how we got the millions of red crits and headshots? Now, we want to do the same thing here, but inflict a blast status effect at the same time as we get the one-hit headshot. Because of how blast works, this means if you take out an enemy that has blast on them, then there's going to be a blast inflicted to all the enemies around them, and it's going to deal ridiculous damage. So let's quickly test that out with all buffs, go and prime the enemies, and then we go for the headshots. And then, see, there you saw it, 1 million with a blast proc, and it instantly nukes everything away that is close to them. And especially if you look at not the red damage number, but the white damage numbers of the blast procs from the enemies that get damaged by the blast AoE, then you will see these numbers are usually even higher. Like I've seen 9, 7, something like that million for the blast proc. Now, to be fair, this Acuity Blast build is nothing necessarily new. This is also something that people like to play on the Exceltra, but in contrast to the Exceltra, the Basmu actually has a relatively high status chance to back this up, right? With the Basmu, the chance of actually inflicting a blast with that one shot, and that's actually pretty darn high. The chance is 60%, excluding the bonuses that are still coming, so this is pretty consistent, and I like it a lot. But of course, if you don't like this Acuity-focused headshot playstyle, you can just use the alternative build right here. This is kind of sort of the same theory, just that here, you don't need to necessarily focus on the headshots, albeit still recommended. And if you now want a whole list of the best primary weapons in Warframe, then you can find that right here. Another massive shoutout to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nuslinux Gaming, Turtlepeer, Ondakanio2, Skylar Bowser, Mihawki, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Morizaki, Shadow Lockhart, Hantares, Patrasator, Boomia1, Mr. Games Plays, Zave, Awindai, Zengen, Quax, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other hopefully in the next one, and until then, have a Basmu-tastic weekend.